Let's conversate.
Let's conversate. I just want you to know, Stuart used to work for me years ago, 20 years ago, and is my next door neighbor, so don't worry, he'll be candid. I won't blow up those bombs in his front yard. So let's start with you, Mitch, in terms of some of your thoughts. Mitch represents the community here in this part of the San Fernando Valley. He's also a member of the Council of Area Governments here for the region, the process to which the mayor referred, and has been involved in that. And Stuart has been part of a larger discussion, the initial projects to which the mayor referred, called Valley on Track. And I want to start with you, Councilman Englander, and let's just give me your introductory thoughts on where we should be going on this.
My first question is,
get ready to ask him a lot of questions, you guys.
how many here, by a show of hands, since we started that off, took public transportation to get to this forum tonight? Be honest. How many? 3, 4, 5. I see 5 hands, 6 hands. Okay. I spend 15 hours a week, 15 hours a week, 60 hours a month, focused directly just on traffic. 15 waking hours a week, sitting an hour and a half to get from my home in Granada Hills to City Hall and back, focused on traffic, clenching my steering wheel, and you've all been there probably every day. Traffic is one of the issues that we all face every single day. If you leave the house at all, you face traffic. It cuts through every demographic, social, economic, color, region, community that impact all of us every day. And with that, the other part of that is, Bob, those are hours not away from work. I spend the exact same amount of time at the office as I would no matter what. That's time away from my family. That's leaving the house before my kids would wake up and coming home often and missing dinner because of traffic. It is the worst quality of life issue we face as a region that affects more people on a daily basis than any issue we have, bar none, and it's frustrating. Now, before I even give you a second thought of what I'm thinking about this, I got to thank Bob for putting this together, but really I want to thank Zev for a second as well. Because for those of you who have not just ridden on the Orange Line, forget if you've ever ridden on, how many here have ridden on the Orange Line? Wow, look at that. Okay, that's a testament. Now, how many here have just driven by on Canoga? It's beautiful, spectacular. People walk, they ride their bikes. I mean, it wasn't just the Orange Line. It revitalized an entire community. It wasn't just transit. It's thriving. Businesses are growing. There's economic development and activity there now because of it. And it works. When I look at the transportation issues and the solutions, I saw the few hands that went up, and I don't think we're going to change any habits overnight. I think with all the connectivity in the world, and if everything were to work 40 years from now, we're going to have as many people in their cars. But you got to look at this as well. How many more people will be using the public transportation, not because they have to, but because they want to? If we could reduce that marginally, look at summer school, look at spring break. When school is out, it's a blessing, it's a dream to drive, for me, from Granada Hills to City Hall. I cut my commute time in half, and that's like 5%. So if we can make just a little difference, it's huge for everyone. That's why I'm here.
Very good.
Thank you.
Mr. Waldman, just so everybody's up to speed, I think it's important as we build some community consensus to make sure everyone understands what's gone before. So take a moment and talk about, in a little bit more detail, the discussion and the process with respect to the 3 initial lines that the mayor referred to. Improvement to the Orange Line with the initially, as Mr. Katz talked about, grade separations and the like. 2, the Sepulveda Pass and what that looks like. And 3, the extender from the Orange Line up through Van Nuys into the northeast part of the valley.
Yeah, that's it. No.
Give us some more details, handsome friend.
Sorry, I worked for him for a long time. You know, when you look at the valley and you look at the map of the valley and you actually look at the rail system in the valley, the metro rail system, we have 2 stops. So,
2 out of how many stops system-wide?
84 or 82? 84?
Just take note of that.
We'll say 84.
Folks.
Yeah. So we look at the Orange Line, hugely successful, built specifically to be converted to rail, and it takes 48 minutes to get from one end of the valley to the other. My wife used to take it every once in a while from Sepulveda, which was halfway, but she ended up standing the whole time. So she decided instead of taking the Orange Line to the Red Line, she would drive to the Red Line, which I think a lot of people are doing. And we thought that by converting it, obviously the upgrades we have to do, and we have to do them right away because we're not going to convert it to light rail tomorrow. That's not going to happen, even if we snapped our fingers and got all the money. But over time, we will.
And Stuart, just real quickly, by the upgrades, just to make sure we're all on the same page, what does that mean in terms of traffic? Right now, you've got to slow down as you come to an intersection, the bus. Right now, the bus often stops at a lot of intersections. Talk about what that means in what it would really look like if those upgrades were completed.
It means that you in the car wait for the bus. So by grade separations, which means you'd either go under or you'd go over where the bus is or where a rail system is, that speeds up everybody's time. But more importantly, it speeds up the time of the Orange Line. So we can cut the time significantly right away to make it easier and more palatable for people. If it takes you 48 minutes to get from the West Valley to the East Valley on the 101, you don't necessarily have the incentive to get out of your car and get on the Orange Line. We believe that by making the upgrades and then eventually converting it to light rail, not only will we be able to increase capacity, but you'll also be able to increase the speed, which is the important.
And just in the near term, because if people are being asked to write a check, the question is, what are you going to get for your check, right? It's what the mayor said. So if you did these upgrades where you either went, you didn't have to stop in traffic, so the traffic's not stopping for the bus and the bus not stopping for the traffic, and you either made a bridge going over or a tunnel going under, right? Or often, like you have for a railroad, you have those railroad crossing arms come down, so the bus doesn't have to slow down. How much will that cost? How long will it take in your judgment? And just that first step, how much time will that save from the 48 minutes, which is currently what it takes to go across the valley in the Red Line? Orange Line, excuse me.
It's a couple $100 million. For the upgrades, and the upgrades can be done pretty easily. And the beauty...
How much time does it save for folks?
There's, it'll save about 15 minutes or so is what...
What does it save, Steve? Do you know? About 15 minutes?
12. I was being generous, so 12 to 15 minutes, which is significant, but we can do better. And then Van Nuys, which is...
Can I just add one other
Sure.
thing? The other idea is that Assemblymember Nazarian passed a bill. Right now, these buses are 60 feet long. By having what's called double articulated buses, 2 of those squishy things that, those bendy things that they've got in the buses, it now goes to 83 feet, and as a consequence, you can carry a lot more folks with not a lot of costs in terms of what those buses are. When Zev and I went to Brazil, that started this whole thing with Mayor Reardon a couple centuries ago, they had what's called a double articulated bus. And so the idea is that you get more capacity and more speed with not a lot of money as the first phase. Is that fair, Stuart?
That is.
Okay.
And
it's about 350 million for the grade separations, the shorter headways, and the crossing gates.
which is relatively cheap if you think about the benefit that we'll get from that. And then when you look at Van Nuys Boulevard and between the Orange Line and Metrolink, there is not the connectivity. This is the second busiest corridor in the San Fernando Valley. It is a heavily minority population and heavily transit dependent. So putting people on just the regular buses, and one of the studies we found was that people on that line were doing their errands. So they were going to the grocery store. 1 minute, I didn't know I had a time limit. Okay, so We want to make that light rail to connect from the Orange Line to Metrolink to make the connectivity. And then obviously the Sepulveda Pass, every person has been stuck here saying, this sucks. We need to fix it. Let's just punch a hole through the mountain, put a train in, connect the west side to the valley. We can do it. We should do it. Let's do it.
Good. Mitch?
So for those of you that didn't put your hands up about taking any public transportation, there's a local return element that's critically important. I'd worked for a couple of years with Councilmember Joe Buscaino in putting together an SOS plan, a Save Our Streets initiative, to fix every street and sidewalk in the entire city of Los Angeles and do so in a quick period of time. That's something that impacts and affects each one of us every single day. The cost of maintenance in a car in the city of Los Angeles is double the national average. Double the national, that's tires, brakes, rotors, drums, and alignment. It doesn't include depreciation. And so for each vehicle, the average is $780 a year. There's a study that comes out every other year by the Texas Institute that puts that out there, and they analyze the condition of streets and the cost of maintenance of cars. And so we're all paying now double the national average. Now, mind you, it doesn't snow here. It's just bad road conditions. And so with that, we're out and we're paying it now. We're not getting the roads fixed. There's a lot of fingers that could be pointed for decades going back, but the reality is that's where we're at. So there's a local return element that could go directly back into fixing roads and streets, and not just major thoroughfares, but residential streets as well in every single community. And there's no funding for that without this, and we'll never catch up. We're about 90 years behind in paving all the streets. A third of the infrastructure, 28,000 lane miles in the city of Los Angeles. The city of Los Angeles has 28,000 lane miles, and it's, I think, from here to the moon is what, 26,000 miles? So we've actually 260,000 miles. And we've got, we've paved over LA. And so we've got to fix that, and that will give us the ability to do that as well.
Thank you, sir. I really, really appreciate it. Stay here. We're going to bring up Richard Katz and Stephanie Wiggins from the Metro Board. And basically the framework here, so everybody understands what the night's going to look like, we're trying to move this on a little quicker, is we're going to have a couple more panels. We're going to have the panel with the Metro to talk about what they're doing. Then we're going to have a panel with CSUN to talk about the impacts on CSUN. Then we want to engage in a discussion so that the folks from Metro can listen to the San Fernando Valley and see where we are as we try to cobble together this coalition of everybody to make sure our needs are met. Now, just want to say one thing, and I'm going to reiterate this in the questions. And the reason I say this is what Councilmember Englander said. If this thing gets passed by all of us, it has basically two big component parts. One is what's the capital improvements for the big stuff, whether, as Stuart was saying, it pops a tunnel through Sepulveda, whether, as the mayor was saying, you add a train to Burbank Airport, the improvements on the Orange Line. Certainly I want to do some 2 lines to come up to Northridge. Whatever those things are, those are the capital big expenditures that the mayor was talking about that are 20, 30, 40 years. And then part of the money pays for the short-term stuff. Some of that is maintenance and operations, which you have to pay for. And some of it, as Councilmember Engler was talking about, is called local return. Mr. Katz will talk about it a little bit more, but the idea of how much money of this sales tax will go to locals to pay for bus lines that you need, to pay for smaller stuff that you need that helps the community out. So that's the framework that I think might be helpful to understand this. We'll have 2 more panels, and then we're going to open it up to a big discussion among everybody, because everybody here represents diverse communities. Mr. Katz.